My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 35 years old, and the day my parents casually told my 11-year-old daughter they had sold her cello was the moment I realized something painful about my own family. The people who raised me had learned how to smile while crossing lines that should never be crossed. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how normal they acted. I knew something was wrong before I even stepped out of the car that afternoon. My parents' house looked exactly the same as always. Wide brick walls, trimmed hedges, the long curved driveway my father loved because he said it made the property look established. Late sunlight reflected off the windows in soft gold. Everything looked peaceful, but the tight feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. Beside me, Ava was humming quietly while unbuckling her seatbelt. She always hummed before practice. "Do you think Great-Grandma Margaret is already in the music room?" she asked, grabbing her binder and the small tin of rosin she kept for her bow. "Probably," I said, forcing a smile. "You know how she is. Early start." That part was true. Margaret Holloway believed music should be treated like discipline wrapped in kindness. Years ago, she had turned one of the rooms in the house into a small conservatory. Temperature-controlled cabinets, shelves filled with handwritten scores, soft lighting, everything designed to protect instruments that were older than most of the houses in our neighborhood. It was the only room in the house that had ever felt peaceful, and it was where Ava's cello lived. Our downtown condo was too small and too echo-filled for an antique instrument worth more than my car. Margaret insisted it stay at the house where it could be protected properly. Ava never complained. Coming here meant time with her great-grandmother and a place where no one compared her to anyone else. She hopped out of the car and hurried toward the front door. I followed more slowly. The moment I unlocked the door, the smell hit me. Fresh paint, sharp and expensive. Underneath it, sawdust and something metallic. Inside, the hallway runner had been rolled halfway up and plastic sheets covered the walls. Blue painter's tape framed the doorways like someone had started renovating the entire house. From somewhere outside came the whining sound of machinery. Ava looked around with wide eyes. "Are they renovating?" "I don't know." But the uneasiness in my stomach grew heavier. No one greeted us, no voices from the kitchen. Just tools humming somewhere in the backyard. Ava walked ahead and reached the rear window first. "Oh." I stepped beside her. The backyard was gone. Where green grass used to stretch toward the trees, a massive rectangular pit had been carved into the earth. Steel framing surrounded the edges, while workers moved between stacks of stone and concrete. An enormous in-ground pool. Permanent, not a temporary project. Ava tilted her head slightly. "Is that for us?" Hope threaded through her voice. I swallowed. "Let's get your cello first." I said it automatically, like saying the words might make everything feel normal again. We walked down the hallway toward the conservatory. The air cooled slightly as we approached, and the quiet hum of the humidifier behind the door gave me a small wave of relief. That meant the instruments were still protected. Everything was fine. Ava pushed the door open. The chair was there, the music stands, the shelves of sheet music. But the corner beside the window was empty. Ava stopped walking. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stared at the empty space, scanning the room carefully as if the cello might be hiding somewhere unexpected. Then she checked behind the chair, behind the cabinet. Her voice came out small. "Did Great-Grandma move it?" "I don't think so," I said quietly. Her hand hovered over the empty space where the cello stand should have been before she slowly pulled it back. "Then, where is it?" The question wasn't angry. It sounded careful, like she was worried she might somehow be responsible. A cold weight settled in my chest. "I'll ask," I said. I walked into the kitchen. My parents were exactly where they always were. My mother Linda stood at the counter with a cup of coffee. My father Stephen sat at the island scrolling on his tablet. My younger brother Jason leaned against the counter, drinking something neon green that probably cost more than my lunch. None of them looked surprised to see me. "Where's Ava's cello?" I asked. My mother sighed dramatically. "Hello to you too, Natalie." "Where is it?" My father finally glanced up, too calmly. "We handled it," he said. Every instinct in my body tightened. Handled it how? He set the tablet down. "We sold it." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. "Sold it?" "It was valuable," he said casually. "Just sitting there. It wasn't yours to sell." Jason laughed under his breath. "She's 11. My mother gestured vaguely toward the backyard. "We're doing something nice for the kids." And suddenly everything clicked. The excavation, the construction, the pool. Behind me, I heard Ava's footsteps stop in the doorway. Silence filled the kitchen. Moments like this never look dramatic while they're happening. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just ordinary voices making decisions that can't be undone. Ava stepped inside slowly, still holding her music binder. My mother gave her a casual smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Ava nodded politely. "Hi, Grandma." Then she asked the question again. "Where's my cello?" My father exhaled impatiently. "We explained to your mom it was sold." Ava blinked. "Sold? Like to another student?" Jason chuckled. "More like a collector." Ava looked from one face to another, waiting for someone to correct him. No one did. Her shoulders pulled inward just slightly. It was such a small movement most people wouldn't notice. "Oh," she said quietly. No tears. No anger. Just acceptance. That hurt more than anything else. "We're leaving," I said. My mother put her mug down harder than necessary. "Natalie, don't make this dramatic. You sold her instrument." "It was a family asset," my father replied. "Your grandmother never clarified ownership." "She absolutely did." Jason shrugged. "Ava will be fine. Kids rent instruments all the time." Ava nodded quickly. "I can still practice," she said softly. "It's okay." I crouched beside her. "Grab your things." We walked toward the door without another word. Behind us, my mother called out sharply, "And don't call Margaret about this. She doesn't need stress right now." I didn't answer. Outside, the noise of construction rushed back in. Drills whining, workers shouting, water splashing into fresh concrete. Ava paused beside the car and looked at the giant hole in the backyard. She stared for a long moment. Then she climbed quietly into the passenger seat. The drive back to our condo felt longer than usual. After several minutes, she spoke. "Maybe Great-Grandma didn't mean for it to be mine yet." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged slightly. "Maybe I wasn't ready." The words landed harder than anything my parents had said. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told her firmly. She nodded, but doubt lingered. That evening, her teacher dropped off a temporary student cello. The varnish was scratched and the tone sounded thin. Ava thanked him politely and began practicing immediately. The first note came out hollow. She adjusted her posture and tried again. Another weak sound filled the room. "I can make it work," she murmured. She kept playing. Again. And again. No complaints. Just effort. Later that night, she hugged me longer than usual before going to bed. After she fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at my phone. My mother's words echoed in my head. Don't tell Margaret. Not don't upset her, just don't tell her. I opened social media without thinking. Jason had already posted pictures of the backyard excavation. "Big upgrade underway, worth every penny." I stared at the photo for a long time. For years I had kept the peace, smiled through favoritism, pretended conflict wasn't worth it. But watching my daughter apologize for something she never did changed something inside me. Silence wasn't kindness. It was permission. And that night, sitting at my kitchen table, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, Ava and I were going to see Margaret, and when my grandmother found out what had happened to that cello, nothing in our family was ever going to be the same again. The next morning, I didn't give myself time to second-guess anything. I just told Ava to get her shoes. She looked up from the table, searching my face for something steadier than hope. "Are we going to school first?" "No," I said. "We're going to see Great-Grandma." Something small lit behind her eyes. Not excitement exactly. More like relief that someone was finally moving. Willow Creek was not what I expected. My mother had described it with that soft, careful voice people use when they want something to sound respectable and final at the same time. But the place was full of sunlight. Music floated from somewhere deeper in the building. The floors gleamed. There was a fountain in the lobby, and the whole place felt less like an ending than a pause. Ava tightened her grip on my hand as we walked inside. At the desk, the receptionist smiled the second I said Margaret's name. "She's been waiting," she said. Of course she had. We found her seated near a tall window with a book open in her lap. She looked smaller there than she had in the old house, but not diminished. Nothing about her felt faded. She looked up once, took in my face, then Ava's, and closed the book without marking the page. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me what happened." Ava moved to her first. "Hi, Great-Grandma." Margaret's expression softened at once. "Hello, my girl." She took Ava's hands and studied her for half a second. "Did you practice yesterday?" Ava hesitated. "With the other one," she said quietly. That was all it took. Margaret lifted her eyes to me, and I started talking. At first I tried to keep it neat. The construction, the room, the empty space, the kitchen. But once I began, the words kept coming, sharper and faster than I meant them to. By the time I finished, my pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Margaret hadn't interrupted once. She turned to Ava. "And what did you think?" Ava stared at the carpet. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "I thought maybe it wasn't really mine yet." Margaret drew in one slow breath. It was the only sign she gave that anything had hit her. Then she leaned forward. "Ava, look at me." Ava lifted her head. "You did nothing wrong," Margaret said. Each word landed hard and clean. "Not one thing." I watched the tension in Ava's face loosen just a little. Then Margaret looked back at me, and the softness disappeared. "When was the last time you saw the file?" I frowned. "What file?" "The appraisal records, insurance papers, the photographs." Memory clicked into place. "A few months ago, in your office." She nodded once. "Good." Her fingers tapped the arm of the chair. Not nervously, thinking. "Do you have proof of when the work started? Messages, photos, anything public?" "Jason's been posting non-stop," I said. "I can save everything." "Do that." Ava looked between us. "Are we in trouble?" Margaret smiled then, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the kind people wore when they already knew where the ground was solid. "No, sweetheart," she said. Quite the opposite. She stood, stepped a few feet away, and pulled out her phone. She kept her voice low, but I still caught pieces. "Yes." "That's confirmed?" "No, it was not authorized." "I want it found." My stomach tightened. When she came back, she sat as calmly as if she'd just asked someone to reschedule lunch. "I'll take care of it," she said. "How?" I asked. "With facts," she replied. Anger makes people defensive. Evidence makes them answer. Ava's feet swung slightly above the floor. "Can I get it back?" Margaret looked directly at her. "Yes." The certainty in that one word made something in my chest crack open. I stared at her. "How can you be so sure?" Her gaze sharpened. "Because they had no right to sell it." I straightened. "What does that mean?" For the first time, she hesitated, not out of doubt, out of choice. "You'll understand soon," she said, "but not today." It should have frustrated me. Instead, it steadied me. She wasn't hoping. She was preparing. Before we left, she spoke to Ava about music as if nothing had been broken beyond repair. bow pressure, phrasing, patience. By the time we stood to go, Ava's posture had changed. Not completely, but enough. In the parking lot, Ava slipped her hand into mine. "She isn't mad at me," she said. "No," I told her. But as I drove away, another thought settled in. Margaret had not looked surprised. Not once. That night, nothing happened. No furious calls, no dramatic confrontation. Just silence. But under that silence, something had started moving. And for the first time since the cello disappeared, I knew we weren't the ones about to be caught off guard. That silence lasted for days. On the surface, life kept moving. I went to work. Ava went to school. I bought groceries, answered emails, folded laundry, paid bills. Everything looked ordinary if you glanced at it quickly enough. But nothing felt ordinary. Every afternoon, Ava practiced with the borrowed cello. And every afternoon, the sound in our condo reminded me of what had been taken. The instrument wasn't terrible. Her teacher had done his best, but it fought her. Notes that used to open naturally now came out thin, stubborn, almost reluctant. She worked harder because of it, longer too. One evening, she stopped halfway through a scale and looked at me from across the living room. "Mom?" "Yeah?" She hesitated, fingers still resting on the fingerboard. "When I play this one, it feels like I'm apologizing." I stared at her. Apologizing for what? She searched for the words. Like I'm asking it to sound right instead of knowing it will. That hit me harder than I expected. I didn't have an answer that would fix anything, so I crossed the room and sat beside her while she tried again. She kept playing, jaw set, shoulders careful, like determination alone could close the distance between what she had lost and what she'd been handed in its place. Later that night, my phone started buzzing. The family group chat. Photo after photo appeared on the screen. The pool nearly finished. Stone decking laid down. Patio furniture unboxed. My brother grinning beside the water with one arm around his son while his daughter splashed in the shallow end. Then the caption. "Perfect for the kids, worth every cent." I stared at it until anger settled into something colder. Still no mention of the cello. No acknowledgement of what had paid for any of it. Just celebration. I took screenshots and sent them to Margaret. Her reply came back almost instantly. "Keep everything. Don't respond." That was it. No outrage, no explanation. Just control. The next few days followed the same pattern. My parents stayed quiet. Jason kept posting. At sunset, the pool lights glowing blue. Inflatable chairs, cannonballs, laughter. Ava saw one of the videos by accident. She froze with the phone in her hand. "That's our backyard," she said softly. I nodded. She watched for another second, then locked the screen, set the phone down, and picked up the borrowed cello, without saying anything else. She practiced for nearly an hour. That night, while putting it away, she paused and asked, "Do you think Great-Grandma is fixing it?" I chose my words carefully. "I think she's doing something." That seemed to be enough for her. Kids don't always need the whole truth. Sometimes they just need to know they haven't been abandoned inside it. Friday evening, another message dropped into the group chat. "Pool reveal, barbecue." Saturday, 2 p.m. Bring a side dish. No apology. No shame. Not even an attempt to pretend the last visit hadn't happened. Just an invitation. Ava looked up from the couch. "Are we going?" "I don't know," I said. But I could already tell she wanted to. Not because she was excited, because some part of her still needed to stand in front of what had replaced her cello and understand what it meant. Later that night, after she was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table again. It seemed like every hard decision in my life found me there lately. Then my phone rang. Margaret. "We're going to the party," she said without greeting. I sat up straighter. "We are?" "Yes." My pulse kicked. "What are you planning?" A pause. Then, very calmly, "I'm correcting an assumption." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in the way she said it. Should I warn them? No. Her voice stayed even. Let them enjoy themselves. A chill moved through me. Before hanging up, she added, quieter this time. Ava needs to see that love doesn't require silence. After the line went dead, I sat there listening to the refrigerator hum and the traffic outside. Across town, my parents were probably admiring their finished pool, convinced the worst had passed. But now I understood what Margaret had really been doing. She hadn't stayed quiet because she was powerless. She had stayed quiet because timing mattered, and whatever was about to happen was not going to happen in private. Saturday arrived bright and almost painfully normal. The kind of early afternoon where every lawn looked trimmed, every driveway clean, and neighbors waved as if nothing complicated ever happened inside their homes. Ava sat quietly beside me while I turned onto my parents' street. Cars already lined both sides of the road. More than I expected. My mother never did anything halfway when she wanted an audience. Ava adjusted the strap of the small bag resting in her lap. Her swimsuit was folded neatly inside, though she hadn't said whether she planned to swim. You don't have to get in the pool, I told her gently. She looked out the window. I just want to see it. There was no excitement in her voice, just curiosity, and maybe a need to understand. The house looked almost festive when we pulled into the driveway. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. Folding tables stretched along the side yard, covered in bowls and trays of food. Laughter floated from the backyard before we even reached the gate. The moment we stepped through, the pool came into full view. Bright blue water shimmered under the afternoon sun. Smooth stones surrounded it, and the small waterfalls spilled into the deep end, like something from a luxury home commercial. Lounge chairs lined the patio. String lights hung above the yard. Even though it was still daylight, people were already admiring it. This is gorgeous. You must be thrilled. Perfect for the kids. Ava stopped walking. Her eyes moved slowly across the water, the patio furniture, the umbrellas, the new landscaping. Understanding settled over her face piece by piece. I rested my hand lightly on her shoulder. She leaned into it, but didn't say anything. My brother stood near the grill, laughing with a group of neighbors, drink in hand. His wife sat beneath an umbrella while their daughter floated in the shallow end on a bright pink inflatable. Their son launched himself into the water with a splash that sent people cheering. My mother spotted us first. Her smile faltered for half a second before she smoothed it back into place. Natalie, Ava, you made it! Like attendance was the only thing that mattered. Hi, Mom, I said evenly. Ava nodded politely. My sister-in-law waved lazily from her chair. You brought a swimsuit. Good timing. The kids are having a blast. Ava didn't move toward the water. My father slapped Jason on the back proudly while speaking to a neighbor. Came out better than I imagined, he said loudly. Adds real value to the property. Value. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Music played softly from outdoor speakers. Plates clinked together. Someone handed out lemonade. From the outside, the party looked perfect. Ava leaned closer to me. It's really big, she whispered. Yeah, I said. Near the grill, my mother raised her glass. Before we eat, she announced brightly, we just want to say how happy we are to finally have a backyard the whole family can enjoy. Applause rippled through the guests. Jason lifted his drink. To family. More applause. I glanced down. Ava's fingers were gripping the towel in her hands. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was just trying to understand how something taken from her had turned into a celebration. Someone near the fence asked casually, Where's Margaret today? I thought she'd be here. My mother's smile tightened slightly. She's settling into her new place, she said lightly. We didn't want to overwhelm her. I almost laughed. At that moment, Ava leaned closer. Did Great-Grandma know about the pool? Before I could answer, the side gate clicked open. The sound wasn't loud, but conversations began to fade one by one. I turned. Margaret stepped into the backyard. She didn't look fragile. She didn't look uncertain. She wore a simple cream blouse and dark slacks, standing perfectly straight. her expression calm enough to quiet the entire yard without raising her voice. Beside her stood a tall man in a gray suit carrying a slim leather folder. Jonathan Reed, Margaret's attorney. The shift in the air was immediate. My father's smile froze. My mother lowered her glass slowly. Jason straightened, irritation already creeping into his face. Margaret's gaze moved slowly across the yard. The pool, the patio, the decorations. She took it all in without speaking. "Well," she said pleasantly, "you've all been busy." No one answered. Ava slipped her hand into mine. My mother forced a laugh. "Mom, this is just a little gathering." "I know," Margaret replied calmly. "That's why I came." She glanced at Ava for a moment, and her expression softened. Ava stood a little taller instantly. Then Margaret turned back to my parents. "I heard the cello was sold." The entire backyard fell silent. My father cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe we should discuss this inside." Margaret tilted her head. "Why?" Her voice remained gentle. "Everything that happened occurred in this house, in full view of everyone who lives here." Unease spread through the crowd. Plates lowered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Jason crossed his arms. "This is embarrassing." Margaret looked directly at him. "Yes," she said evenly. "It is." Jonathan stepped forward and opened the folder in his hands. Papers slid into view. Margaret faced my parents again. "The instrument in question," she said calmly, "was never a family asset." My father frowned. "You never told us that." "I didn't need to," Margaret replied, "because it was placed into a trust." A ripple moved through the guests. My mother blinked. "A trust?" "Yes," Margaret said. "I serve as trustee." She gestured gently toward Ava. "And she is the beneficiary." The words hung in the warm afternoon air. My father shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. It was kept here." "Stored here," Margaret corrected. "Not owned here." Jonathan handed my father a document. Margaret continued speaking, her voice steady. "The instrument was professionally appraised, photographed, cataloged, insured. Every identifying detail recorded long before this week." Jason let out a short laugh. "Well, nobody told us." Margaret nodded once. "That's correct." Her agreement somehow sounded harsher than accusation. My mother's voice trembled. "Then why didn't you explain?" Margaret met her eyes. "Because people behave differently when they believe something belongs to them." Silence followed. My father swallowed. "Where is it now?" A faint smile touched Margaret's lips. "Safe." Ava inhaled beside me. Jonathan cleared his throat. "The instrument was located earlier today after formal notice was issued. Arrangements have been made for its return." Relief escaped Ava in a breath she couldn't hide. Jason's composure cracked. "You called the police?" Margaret didn't react. "I addressed a legal matter." My father's voice sharpened. "You're overreacting." Margaret gestured lightly toward the pool. "You sold property that did not belong to you and used the proceeds for construction. It improved the house," he insisted. Margaret's expression hardened. "A house you do not own." The warmth drained out of the gathering. My mother stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan stepped forward again, extending another document. "Notice to vacate," he said calmly. 60 days. Gasps spread among the remaining guests. Jason barked out a laugh. "You're kicking us out over an instrument?" "Cello," Ava whispered automatically. Everyone heard her. Margaret looked at Jason. "I'm enforcing boundaries that should never have been crossed." My father scanned the paper, color draining from his face. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious," Margaret replied. Around us, guests began quietly collecting their things. Conversations resumed in low murmurs as people drifted toward the gate. The celebration was over. In the pool, the kids were still splashing, unaware that the ground beneath their parents had just shifted. Ava tugged gently at my sleeve. Am I getting it back? I knelt beside her. Yes. Margaret stepped closer and addressed her directly. You never lost it, she said softly. It was taken. Ava's lip trembled. I thought I did something wrong. A flash of anger crossed Margaret's face. You did nothing wrong. Behind us, my parents had begun arguing with Jonathan in tight, frantic voices. My father stared at the pool like it had betrayed him. Jason paced across the patio. For the first time since this started, the balance had changed. Not because anyone shouted, because the truth had finally been spoken where everyone could hear it. And when truth arrives like that, quietly and publicly at the same time, there's no way to pretend afterward that nothing happened. The party unraveled quickly. Guests slipped out through the gate one by one, avoiding eye contact. My mother stood frozen beside the grill, the eviction notice shaking in her hand. My father read the paper again and again, as if the words might rearrange themselves. Jason dragged his hands through his hair. This is insane, he muttered. Jonathan didn't raise his voice. The paperwork has already been filed. That ended the argument before it could begin. Ava stayed beside me, watching everything carefully. Not frightened, just thoughtful. Across the yard, the kids were finally pulled out of the pool, confused by their parents' sharp voices. Water dripped across the stone deck. My father turned toward Margaret. You humiliated us, he said quietly. Margaret didn't blink. No, she replied. You humiliated yourselves. Jason scoffed. All this over an instrument. Ava flinched slightly. Margaret's voice remained calm. Children remember who protects them, she paused, and who does not. My mother's voice softened. Mom, where are we supposed to go? Margaret's expression gentled but did not change. You have 60 days. That's more than fair. My father gestured toward the pool. We improved this place. With stolen money, Margaret said. Jonathan added quietly, the buyer has already requested repayment. My father went pale. Jason rounded on him. You told us it was fine! Their argument exploded into the open air. Ava leaned closer to me. Are they really leaving? Yes, I said quietly. She watched them, confusion in her eyes. Kids don't celebrate consequences. They try to understand them. Margaret touched Ava's shoulder gently. Would you like to go home? Ava nodded. We walked toward the gate while voices behind us rose into angry shouts. My mother called my name once. I didn't turn around. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for fixing anything. Outside the gate, the air felt cooler. Ava exhaled slowly. I thought she was going to yell. Margaret smiled faintly. Yelling rarely changes behavior. Ava looked up at her. What does? Margaret opened the car door. Preparation. As I started the engine, Margaret's phone rang. She listened for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes, tomorrow will be fine. She ended the call and glanced at Ava through the mirror. It seems your cello will be coming home sooner than expected. Ava froze. Really? Margaret nodded once, and for the first time in weeks, Ava smiled. Ava didn't say much during the drive home. She sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window while the afternoon light shifted across the buildings. Every so often I glanced in the mirror, half expecting the smile I'd seen at the gate to fade. It didn't. It stayed there, small, careful, but real. Margaret rested one hand lightly on the center console as we drove. You did the right thing, she said to me. I shook my head. No, you did. Her lips curved faintly. You chose not to stay silent, she said. That's where change begins. We dropped her off first. She stepped out of the car with the same calm she'd carried through the entire afternoon, like the storm we'd just left behind had been something she'd already calculated weeks ago. Before closing the door, she leaned slightly toward Ava. Be ready tomorrow, she said gently. For what? Ava asked. Margaret's eyes warmed. For a reunion? Then she closed the door and walked toward the entrance without looking back. The next afternoon, the knock came while Ava was finishing her homework at the kitchen table. It wasn't loud, just firm, certain. Ava looked up immediately. "Mom?" My heart started pounding before I even reached the door. When I opened it, 2 delivery workers stood in the hallway outside with a long black case resting on a wheeled cart. Shipping labels covered the surface. Warning stickers, tracking barcodes. One of the men checked his clipboard. "Delivery for Natalie Brooks." I signed without thinking. The door closed behind them, leaving the case in the center of our living room. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Ava stepped closer first. "Is it?" "Yes," I said softly. She crouched beside the case, but didn't open it yet. Her fingers hovered over the latches like touching them too soon might ruin the moment. "Should we wait?" I asked. "For Great-Grandma?" She nodded instantly. Margaret arrived 20 minutes later carrying a small tin of peppermint tea like she had brought the conservatory with her. "Well," she said when she saw the case, "shall we?" Ava knelt again and lifted the first latch. The metal clicked, then the second. The lid rose slowly. Inside, the cello rested exactly as it had before everything fell apart. Amber wood glowing softly under the light. The curve of the instrument familiar and unmistakable. Ava inhaled sharply. Her fingers trembled as she traced the neck, following the grain of the wood the way someone greets a friend they were afraid they'd never see again. "It's okay," Margaret murmured. Ava lifted the cello carefully and settled it against her shoulder. For a moment she just stood there, eyes closed. Then the bow touched the strings. The first note filled the room instantly. Warm, full, alive. The difference between this sound and the borrowed instrument was impossible to miss. It spread through the condo like something breathing again. Ava laughed quietly under her breath. "It sounds like itself." Margaret smiled. "Of course it does." Ava played a short passage she'd struggled with all week. This time, the music opened easily, the tone blooming across the room the way it used to in the conservatory. When she finished, she turned and wrapped her arms around Margaret. "Thank you." Margaret hugged her back. "You never needed to thank me for protecting what was already yours." My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from my mother. "We need to talk." Another one followed almost immediately. "This has gone too far." I silenced the phone without replying. For the first time, their urgency didn't matter. Ava spent the rest of the afternoon playing, not practicing, just playing. Music moved through every room of the condo. At one point, someone tapped gently on the wall from the neighboring apartment. I braced for a complaint. Instead, a voice called through the wall. "Please don't stop." I laughed quietly. "We won't." Later that evening, Margaret and I sat at the kitchen table while Ava continued playing in the next room. "They're dealing with repayment demands now," Margaret said calmly. "The buyer?" "Yes." I pictured the phone call my parents must have received. The realization. The panic. "They'll blame you," I said. Margaret folded her hands together. "They already do." "And me?" Her eyes softened slightly. That's often the price of refusing denial. In the other room, Ava played scale after scale, the sound steady and confident again. Margaret took a small sip of tea. "I updated my estate arrangements," she added casually. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The house will be placed into a trust as well," she said. "Protect it properly this time." I stared at her. "Grandma." She shook her head. "Security is not cruelty. It's clarity." From the living room came the bright sound of Ava finishing a passage and laughing softly to herself. I hadn't heard that sound in weeks. The tension with my parents didn't disappear quietly. At first, it came through short messages in the family chat. "Stephen, we need to talk." "Linda, this situation is getting serious." "Jason, nobody expected legal trouble." I read every message without responding. Across the room, Ava practiced scales, glancing down every few minutes as if checking that the cello was still there. She was different now. The careful shrinking she used to do around my parents had begun to fade. A few days later, my phone rang. My mother. "Natalie," she said immediately, "your father is dealing with lawyers now. The buyer wants every dollar returned." I figured. "This didn't have to happen," she continued tightly. "Your grandmother humiliated us." I looked toward Ava, who was practicing again in the living room. "No," I said calmly. "You sold something that didn't belong to you." Silence stretched across the line. "We thought it belonged to the family," she insisted weakly. "You didn't ask." Her voice softened slightly. "We were trying to make the house better for everyone." The familiar justification. For years I would have tried to smooth it over. Not this time. "Ava was part of everyone," I said. She didn't respond. After a moment, she said quietly, "We may have to move, sell things." The pause that followed was unmistakable. She expected sympathy, maybe help, maybe for me to offer a solution. Instead, I said gently, "I hope you figure it out." When the call ended, my hands were steady. That evening, Margaret invited us to dinner at the house. The moment we stepped inside, everything felt different. No construction noise, no tense silence, just quiet. Ava walked straight to the conservatory doorway and paused. "Can I?" Margaret smiled. "You never needed permission." The humidifier hummed softly as Ava began to play. The sound filled the house, reclaiming the space that had once felt so tight and uneasy. I stood beside Margaret in the hallway. "They're struggling," I said. "Yes," she replied. "You don't feel bad?" She considered the question carefully. "I feel sad," she said finally, "but consequences are not cruelty." Before we left, she handed me a folder. Jonathan finalized everything. Inside were the trust documents, the estate protected, Margaret listed as trustee, my name next, Ava named as beneficiary alongside the cello. My throat tightened. "Grandma, this is too much." She shook her head gently. "This is prevention." Outside, Ava waited beside the car, hugging the cello case. As we drove home, she looked at me through the mirror. "It feels different there now." "How?" She thought for a moment. "Like I don't have to be careful where I stand." I understood exactly what she meant. A week later, moving trucks appeared outside my parents' house. Furniture carried out piece by piece while neighbors watched discreetly from their driveways. The pool still shimmered in the backyard, but now it looked strangely out of place, like a monument to a decision nobody wanted to remember. Ava watched quietly when we drove past one afternoon. "Are they mad at us?" she asked. "Maybe," I said honestly. She nodded slowly. Then she surprised me. "That's okay." She didn't sound angry, just certain. And in that moment, I realized something. Ava had learned a lesson many adults never do. Fairness doesn't always feel good in the moment, but afterward, it lets you breathe. At the beginning of all this, I said something that felt painfully true at the time. The day my parents sold my daughter's cello was the day I realized some people can smile while crossing lines that should never be crossed. I understand that moment differently now. Not because what happened became less wrong, but because what came after proves something far more important. A few weeks after the chaos, Ava and I walked back into the Holloway house again. The place felt different, not quieter exactly, just lighter. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floors without interruption. No tense voices from the kitchen. No careful silence from Ava trying not to take up too much space. Margaret stood in the foyer with her hands folded calmly. "Welcome home," she said. Ava didn't run inside. She moved slowly from room to room, taking everything in. The open living room, the quiet hallway. The absence of pressure she'd learned to recognize long before she could explain it. When she reached the conservatory doorway, she paused. "Can I?" Margaret smiled. "You never needed permission." Ava set up her cello and began to play. The first note filled the house completely, warm and steady, echoing through every room like the house itself had been waiting for it. I leaned against the doorway beside Margaret. "She stands differently now," I said quietly. Margaret nodded. "Children grow fast once they feel safe." Outside, the pool still existed. Through the window, you could see the water reflecting the sky, but it no longer meant anything to us. Just stone and water sitting behind a house that no longer belonged to the wrong people. A few days later, Margaret officially moved back in. Not as someone being taken care of, but as the center of the house again. Ava helped unpack boxes, stacking sheet music and placing Margaret's peppermint tea tin beside the music stand where it had always belonged. They laughed quietly while organizing the shelves. That evening, we sat together in the living room while Margaret's lawyer reviewed the final documents. The house placed safely into trust, the estate protected. Margaret as trustee, me next. And Ava listed as beneficiary alongside the cello that had started this entire story. Ava looked between us. "So, we stay here?" Margaret's smile was soft. "Yes, darling." Ava didn't say anything else. She just leaned forward and hugged her. Later that spring, Ava auditioned for the Regional Youth Orchestra, the same audition she had nearly given up after losing her instrument. Margaret and I waited outside the room while she played. When the door opened, Ava came running toward us, breathless and grinning. "I got in!" Margaret laughed softly. "Of course you did." That night, the house filled with music again, not practice this time. Celebration. The windows glowed gold with sunset, while Ava played freely, every note confident and clear. Standing there, listening, I finally understood something. This story was never just about getting a cello back. It was about making sure my daughter never had to shrink herself to belong. Because when someone tries to take your future and build something shiny with it, the people who truly love you don't ask you to stay quiet. They stand beside you. They tell the truth, and they protect what matters. For years, I believed peace meant avoiding conflict. Now I know peace means knowing your child never has to apologize for existing. And if you've ever been in a moment where speaking up felt impossible, I hope this story reminds you that sometimes the moment you almost stay silent is the moment that changes everything. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts below. Someone out there might need to hear it too.